delighted to just share my opening thoughts and hand it over to Ravi, Niranjana, Natasha, and Ambika. They are the experts here. So broadly at CII, we are wanting to be part of the CI startup ecosystem as much as possible. And I've discussed with Ravi around a year back, saying that the one of the biggest things we need to focus on is connected to supply chain and logistics. And but more importantly, before that, I've been discussing the need for all businesses to become responsible businesses in a very broad sense. And today's topic is a very important component of all of us becoming responsible business folks. Time will come, hopefully within the next 2 years, but maybe probably 5 years from now, none of you will consume any product which is done by or produced or services which is manufactured or made by a company which is not a responsible business. It is going to happen. Will it take 2 years? Hopefully. Will it take 5 years? I don't know. But today's event is part of that thought process. It is such an important component. If you're able to fix this component, half our battle is won, if not more. So I'm very excited to see all of you. We are triggering a conversation. Hopefully, even if we light a small fire somewhere, it will eventually get into a revolution. And thank you again, Ranjana, Natasha, and Ambika. Thank you, Ravi, in advance for having the passion and the drive to keep at it for so many months. And all the very best. I'm sure we'll have a amazing discussion. I'm going to just switch off here and over to you, Ravi.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks very much, Ninad. Admittedly, there's some nervousness because there are three experts whom I have to field this evening. I'm going to start with so good evening to everyone, and I'm going to start with some fun facts. Eximpedia data for 2024 reveals India's substantial contribution to global commerce. With exports of $5.9 billion in pharma alone, $4.9 billion in organic and inorganic chemicals, and about $2.4 billion in dairy products. Now, there is a common thread amongst these diverse exports, which is a reliance on cold chain logistics, right? And with the demand for perishable goods growing, India's cold chain logistics market is expected to reach $11.5 billion in 2024 and close to $20 billion by 2029. This is the Modern Intelligence study that I'm quoting from. And yet, despite this growth, there is an inefficient cold chain that exists, which results in significant losses, not just India, but globally as well. And I think, if you look at these facts, this is reason enough for us to have this, discussion this evening, right? So without further ado, I'd like to, introduce our panelists. I think people who are tuned in have already read about them, but very briefly, we have Ambika Satpathy, who is co-founder of Fresher, which is a one-stop shop for bulk meat purchases, focusing on the HoReCa segment and powered by their digital ordering and tracking platform. We have Niranjana Neelakantan, who is the co-founder and COO of Tessol, which provides cold chain, solutions. And we have Natasha Kothari, who's with OneCrowd, a director and partner with OneCrowd, who has coincidentally invested, in these two startups. So I think we are poised for a very interesting discussion. What I'd like to do is let's keep this interactive. I'll start off with a few questions. Some of them pointed at what the three of you, but feel free to sort of jump in because many of these questions are relevant to all of you, either from an investor perspective, from a user perspective, which is Ambika, and from the solution provider perspective, which is Niranjana. And so I'd like to start with Ambika first, and on the side we will keep getting questions. I'm guessing, so we'll take that up, as and when they come up, or perhaps at the end, depending on how the flow is. So that's the housekeeping bit. But Ambika, we'll start with you. I think I was very curious to read about the fact that some years back you had actually set up a poultry farm in Odisha. And from there on you've moved to co-founding Fresher. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Sure, sure. Thank you so much, Ravikant. And it's really a pleasure to be here with two more very smart women on the panel. And absolutely, I'd love to brainstorm with Niranjana as well, since she is a solution provider. So I hope at the end of these discussions, we'll be able to go offline and have business proposals as well on the table. So yes, very excited to be here. Very quickly, I'll tell you what our story is. So basically, we are two co-founders, my husband and I, Sadanand and I, and we have always been very passionate about the food space. I have previously worked at a boutique food consulting company, and I've also worked as a very senior team member at Zomato's online ordering business.
Oh.
So I've really not done anything else in my life, from the beginning of my career, been focused on the food and agri space. So when we first started, our thing was that we wanted to be in the meat space. Of course, one of the big reasons was that we were hardcore non-vegetarians. But really, when we went deeper into the sector, we saw that, it's very, very large. It's a $50-60 billion industry. And if you look at any developed country or even a, developing middle income country anywhere in the world, you will not see this level of disorganization that exists in the meat sector in India, probably in any other sort of parallel economy in the world, right? So 97-98% of the sector is unorganized. And what we believed it meant for us was that, we can be at the cusp of this change. This change will happen. It is not possible that the industry will remain unorganized for another decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. The government is very keen to organize the space, for obvious reasons around consumer health and safety, food safety, disease outbreaks, etc. So there is a big push towards organizing the sector. And if we felt that we are one of the first few in the space, we will benefit from that tailwind, right? That was, and of course, it's a large sector. So personally, I never like to operate in niche sectors where there isn't enough depth in the market, because if there isn't enough depth, you can't build a big business, right? Fundamentally, unless you get very lucky and there's some tailwind that takes the whole industry over the moon. So it is with those motivations that we entered this sector. But because it is so unorganized, there isn't a lot of data out there. Like, there's no McKinsey report which tells you which part of the value chain is broken. That's a journey you have to be on and figure it out yourself. So we said, okay, let's start with the fundamentals. Let's become farmers ourselves, right? Everybody says we are going to solve the problems of the farmer, but nobody's ever farmed in their life, right? So let's just actually see firsthand what the problem of a sort of a medium-sized farmer, commercial poultry farmer is. We ran our poultry farms for a good 3 to 4 years, and that was really our sort of MBA in the food and the agri space. And one of the things we realized was out of that experience was that, if there is intervention needed, urgently needed, of course, there's intervention needed in every part of the value chain, but what is the lowest hanging fruit, where I'll get the maximum bang for my buck in terms of, incremental growth for capital deployed, for example, that was in the post-harvest supply chain, because the post-harvest supply chain in the meat sector was very, very disorganized. So, the farming sector, you still had the Venkis and the Sugunas who had gone to a great, sort of extent in commercializing the production part of the business. But everything post-production was a complete mess, and it continues to remain a mess, right? So there's still a long way to go for us to operate in that. Whether it is fresh produce, fresh and chilled, or frozen produce, everything post-harvest, sorting, grading, packing, chilling, freezing, transportation, warehousing, delivery, every part of it needs solutions. So that was really our journey, where we dirtied our hands for a few years, then set up the private limited, focused on the post harvest supply chain. And within that we had our own set of learning. So it's very easy in India to say, oh, this is $100 billion opportunity. It is $100 billion opportunity. But which part of that market can you play in? Where is it that you will get good clients? Where is it that there'll be infrastructure that exists, or at least some infrastructure that exists that allow you to build on top of that, right? Where is it that the sourcing is more practical? So those were learnings that we had, through which we narrowed down on the B2B, Horeca, and institutional business. In India, is effectively there are only four ways to sell meat, and one of which, the big sector, I would say maybe 30-40% of the sector, is institutional and Horeca. And even within that, we work with premium brands. So the Leela Palace Group is a client, the GMR Group is a client. We work with Licious. So these are the kind of brands we like to be associated with, because they are growing, and they are, if you are basically a feeder business to those kind of brands, you will grow with them, right? So that's really what our approach to the sector has been. And of course, just to wrap it, the idea being that if I spend 10, 20, 30 years in this space, right? Maybe when I started, 99% of it was disorganized. Maybe by the time I leave, and not just entirely because of my efforts, but because of everybody's efforts dovetailing, maybe that might come down to 60 or 70%. So can we really bring that change in our sector, right? Which is crying for change, literally, and ride that wave and benefit ourselves, and of course benefit the sector, the people who work in it, the kind of environmental impact the sector has, the kind of human impact it has in terms of health, hygiene, food safety. So can we just sort of, ride on that wave together and bring that change about?
Thanks. That's very useful. I think there are two, three big points you've made, and we clearly have started well because the questions have already started coming in on some of the stuff that you've spoken about, Ambika. But we'll hold that for later, right? And I think clearly you spoke about depth, and the first thing you spoke about is the lack of organization, right? And in the mess, especially in the post-harvest supply chain, and we'll come back to that. Niranjana, again, with you, it's been a transformation from being an HR professional at the start of your career, to co-found Tessol, which provides, cold chain solutions. So please tell us more about how the transformation happened.
All right. So I think Ambika, to start with, since I echo every bit of what she said. It's just that they're on the consumer side and we're on the supplier side. But I think the challenges and so on are very, very similar. Coming to my background, Tessol as a business was founded in 2013, and we offer sustainable solutions for temperature control movement of food and pharmaceutical products. So I joined the business around 2018, and I joined the business as an HR head when the business had suddenly grown from being about 5 people to about 25 people. I started engaging with the business and then came on board full time around 2018. And from then on, I've just been part of the growth in terms of taking multiple responsibilities that the business required as and when it happened. And in 21 was when I was promoted as the co-founder, and currently I take care of operations, finance, and other portfolios. So that's been my journey from being a hardcore HR professional to what I do now. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. And, Natasha, I am now going to put you, on the spot, but with a question, which is that, given the mess that Ambika spoke about, right? What made OneCrowd, invest in not one, but, 2 companies in the logistics space. But before that, if you can tell us a little bit about, OneCrowd itself, because, unlike a lot of other investment, firms, early stage VCs, etc., OneCrowd is different because of the crowdfunding aspect of it. So if you can tell our audience a little bit about what sets OneCrowd about, and then of course, the difficult question on, how did you spot these 2 and invest in both of them?
Yeah. No, thanks, Ravi. Very interesting. And thank you for inviting me and the other 2 lovely women on the panel. But our journey has been quite interesting. We started off actually, the OneCrowd as a organization started off in 2015. And we started off trying to actually achieve this objective to support companies by investing in them, and especially coming in early, right? And that's very important because once you start supporting these companies early on and then continue to support them, then you will see change in the industry, like what Niranjana spoke about, Ambika spoke about, and the evolution that you're going to see maybe in the next 5-10 years, right? So the overall objective about One Crowd is to invest in early and support entrepreneurs in their journey. We started off as a platform where we invited a lot of members who came together to invest and support companies like you can see in Tessol and Pressure. But more importantly, we've evolved to a fund model. But in a fund model, we also have the option to choose where you want to make your investments in. So you can create your own portfolio, and there is a structure that SEBI has come out with, which is called the Angel Fund. So that's very interesting for us because many investors do tend to focus on certain sectors, and I mean logistics, supply chain is a huge opportunity itself, right? Niranjan and Ambika will tell you about their journey in terms of how One Crowd has supported them, but that's a role that One Crowd likes to play. The other part about One Crowd is that we try to bring an ecosystem together. In various areas, we try and help companies to scale up, right? More importantly, going beyond capital, that is, in organization building or in, helping them connect to the industry, helping them understand, what is the next round should look like, where the strategy of the business should go, and so on and so forth. So we try and play a very important role as these companies evolve, and that's who we are. um, Typically we try to invest when the companies are at seed stage. We can go up to series A and maybe beyond that, but that's who we are, Ravi.
Okay.
And now, yeah, coming to the most important question, right? So, Ravi, initially when we started off, of course, we were building out and we used to go out and talk to a lot of incubators, accelerators, go and attend a lot of events. We started getting a lot of references, etc. But we also realized over a period of time, there are certain sectors where we see a lot of opportunity. And we spotted Ambika because we see that what journey she's been on and what she's actually doing seems to be a very, very big opportunity. And that comes to the point on the fragmented part of the supply chain, the disorganized part of the supply chain, and what she's really solving for. So we saw an opportunity in terms of the not in the next few years, but over the next 5, 10, even 15, 20 years, what Ambika is trying to do seems very interesting. Of course, when she started off, she was also building out, and we wanted to ride along with her. And that's why Fresher becomes a very important part of our investment journey. And on the other hand, when we look at Tessol, it's a very interesting play. I believe that sustainability is a very, very important theme that we look at from One Crowd's perspective. And I think Niranjana and Rajat fit in that theme that we look at.
Yeah.
And that's why the investment in Tessol, and specifically, I think that's a very important tailwind, I would say, today, that is going to impact this sector as well as across sectors, right? And sustainability has become very important, not only for very focused funds, but overall from corporations and big businesses across the world are looking at this segment. So I think that's we would say these are the two important things that we looked at when we invested in both of them.
Thank you. And, one of the things that you spoke about, Tessol, in terms of sustainability sets the tone for my next question, which is to Niranjana. I was reading a little bit about your innovative PCM technology, which is, claims to be 100% fuel-free and environment-friendly, right? So if you could tell us a little bit about that, because, and that is the larger subject for this session, actually, this evening, right?
As I said, sustainability is the core of everything that we do. And what we are trying to do is, when we're talking about the supply chain, I think transportation is a large piece of the whole supply chain. And we're trying to green that piece, wherein we are replacing diesel with more sustainable and eco-friendly materials. And PCM, which is phase change chemical, is one such technology, wherein we are using these chemicals in thermal batteries, and using the thermal the latent heat in them to kind of provide the required temperatures that products need for movement. In very simple words, it is something like if you're looking at water which freezes at 0 degrees, and you have ice, and when the ice melts, it releases energy. Right. So same thing in terms of PCM. These are specialty chemicals which freeze at different temperatures. So depending upon the requirement, for example, if you're looking at moving meat, which requires frozen temperatures, and we have specialty chemicals which freeze at certain temperatures, and thereby enable us to maintain temperatures in enclosed spaces, which can be anything from a large refrigerated vehicle to something as small as a small box, and thereby and specific temperatures which make the cold chain viable, reliable, and sustainable. And at this point, I just want to add something which is the core advantage that we as a business and a technology that we bring, is that one of the main reasons that, as Ambika said, that the industry, which is not just for meat, but any kind of cold chain, or is very, very fragmented. And the main reason is because cold chain is invariably unviable for smaller part loads. So even in a country like India, if you're looking at even as a layman, if you just look, you would see very large refrigerated vehicles, right? But till I think COVID, or till COVID, yes, but you would very rarely see any kind of cold chain for smaller loads. So if you went and bought ice cream from a store, you either had to eat it right away or rush home, right, and put it in the fridge, because there was no way you could actually maintain the temperature, which includes buying meat, fish, anything, right? Even it is still very recently, you buy meat and you just bring it in a brown paper bag or a polythene cover, which is not just impacting the quality of the food that you're consuming, but also resulting in a huge amounts of wastage. Right. And that is where we as a player have actually disrupted the industry, wherein we are one of the first, or in fact, the first players in India to make solutions for last mile cold chain. So we use these PCM in encapsulations, which is very similar to a gel pack that you would see. And then through that, these freeze at different temperatures, and they would even freeze in a regular refrigerator, at a home refrigerator. And thereby we are able to provide simple solutions that will enable you to maintain the required temperatures for movement. And that varies from, you could use that even for a small slab of butter to something as large as a vehicle. So the technology, the core value that we are providing is we are replacing diesel, thereby greening the supply chain. For every vehicle that that switches to our technology, there's almost about 1,000 liters of diesel that is saved per year. And the second thing is that for smaller part loads, like small package sizes, we're able to make it extremely viable and reliable. So that is the key impact and the value that a business like ours and a technology that we bring to the supply chain. Yeah.
And this is a question, I'm just building on what you said, Niranjana, and it's probably something that Ambika would be looking at Fresher. And from past experience and my own trials in other categories on building sustainable packaging or products, I've seen that they typically tend to be more expensive, which is why in India we haven't yet moved to that. And when you have investors from overseas, they're talking about, sustainable packaging and so on and so forth. And then you realize that it just takes up the cost. I'll probably first ask Ambika the question and then come back to you, Niranjana, on, when you are looking at cold chain solutions for meat, when you're supplying B2B, have you sort of looked at, is this cost an issue? Is that a barrier for you to embrace, something what Tessol offers?
Yeah, sure. See, my view on the matter is that food waste, especially in the kind of sector that we are operating in, right? We're an uber perishable category that we work with. Uh, any kind of trade-off in favor of a wastage prevention technology will always pay off, because the cost of the wastage is very, very high. I was just looking at some of the statistics that, almost 40% of all the food produced globally is wasted. And the fun fact is, or the not so fun fact is, that if wasted food was a country, then it would be the third largest producer of carbon dioxide in the world after USA and China. So that is the level of wastage that there is. And when I'm dealing with a category like meat, which is a high value category, right? A tomato might be 20 rupees a kg, a potato might be 10 rupees a kg in wholesale, but my products in wholesale, even in wholesale, are sometimes 20 to 40 times that price, right? So it's an expensive product that I deal with. And even 1 kg wastage is a huge financial loss. So to answer your question, yes, price matters. I mean, if somebody comes up with a very cool technology that will bring my wastage down to 0%, but then the cost is exorbitant, it is not going to work. But if there are reasonably priced technologies which help me go from, what is currently, I would say we have an industry beating, wastage and sort of dump percentage, it's less than 2%. But if someone can help me go in an affordable way from 2 to 1%, and then eventually from 1 to 0.5%, it can never be zero, but as low as practically possible, we would look at it. I think the risk with pricing in a country like India, we have to understand that everybody does not have access to venture capital funding and the ability to make investments. So I think pay per use models could be very interesting in this space. Often the capex involved in transitioning to newer technologies, even if I do the maths and I know that in the long term it will pay off, the reality is that these are new technologies. They're still being tested in live markets, right? And that whole upfront cost can sometimes become an issue. So, for example, I think a few years ago, Niranjana would know this better, a transition happened from large cold rooms to modular cold storages, right? That was a hit. I do remember there was a time when like cold storage capacity was a problem in this industry. And I think that has now changed, because even if I go to a tier 2, tier 3 city, like, Bhubaneswar, for example, I have surplus cold chain capacity available now. Modular cold storages are everywhere. There are still I think gaps in cold chain logistics. I still think that in last mile, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, it's not that well built out. But cold chain warehousing itself went through this revolution towards modular cold storages, right? So if you can bring down the upfront cost and try and move the consumer as much as possible to a pay per use or leasing kind of model, I think you can actually charge a decent price for your service, still solve the customer's problem, and have some good sort of volume uptake as well.
I think the pay-per use is a very interesting idea, especially if you want to bring in sustainability into your solutions at a higher cost. I have a question for Natasha before I come back to you, Niranjana, because we've got a question on TCM that's come in from somebody who's tuned in. Natasha, so see, some of the solutions that Ambika spoke about from in the sustainability context are long-term, right? But when you're looking at it as an investor, right, you are perhaps as anxious, if not more, than the founders, to address cash burn, right? And if these are expensive solutions, which is then going to become a barrier in terms of building that business, what's your perspective on sustainability in the context of it being expensive, whilst of course over a long term, it will pay off?
No, interesting question, Ravi, because you're right that it is not easy for adoption of these technologies or solutions that come out, right? And as I said, that both the entrepreneurs, Ambika and Niranjana, know that because they're going through that journey, right? I think a lot more patience is required. I mean, to be honest, in terms of how you see these businesses evolved, but more importantly, I think when you look at sustainability, there is a lot of talk about electric vehicles. There's a lot of talk about government doing a lot of things in the electric vehicle space, subsidies and so on and so forth. Maybe there should be more policies around the sustainability side, which are more structured, I would say, which will entail a lot more people jumping into the sector. And when you say jumping into the sector, means you have a lot more bigger corporations jumping in, you have mid-sized players jumping in, you have adoptions starting to take place, right? So I think these are some of the things that if we see more clearly coming out over the next few years, I'm sure some of these businesses can scale much faster than what we can see today, right? Otherwise, what will also happen is that something like what Niranjana is doing, she may tend to go out of India and try and sell her solution, right? I mean, Middle East is a great market for her. They've also tried to sell some solutions in Australia, right? But India is a difficult market. It's not easy. So yeah, I mean, we'll have to work upon some of these factors to see adoption of these technologies taking place.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, Ravi, just to build on what both Ambika and Natasha spoke about. See, we are a technology provider, and for us, we understand that cost does in India, and I think any economy for that matter, but in a country like India, where Ambika mentioned that there is not so much free capital, and we still have a long way to go in terms of the adoption of these kind of technologies. But even for us, for countries like us, cost is a huge factor, and in many cases a deterrent for adoption. And that is where companies like us, we are multiple things that we do to make the solution affordable and viable for our end customer. One is in terms of what something exactly on the lines of what Ambika mentioned. So we do have a pay-per-use model. Wherein we're not just doing a capital sales model, which is something that we do for large businesses, but to enable the larger adoption of this technology across sectors and businesses of varying sizes, because something like cold chain is something that everybody needs, right? So we also offer a leasing model wherein we lease our equipment. We also have an operate model, which is a pay per use. So, for example, if you're somebody who would want to use gel packs, which is I'm putting it in very layman terms so that anybody who's listening to the conversation can understand. So we do have a model wherein we deploy our assets at the customer location, and also offer them these frozen gel pads. Right. So if somebody wants to use 2 gel pads or 3 gel pads for smaller movement, we're doing that. And that is our contribution, rather, to make it affordable and accessible to a larger community, right? The other thing is that Ambika mentioned about cold storages and modular cold storages, right? And which is again something that you see in the supply chain, where the cold chain is more developed or matured in the farm level, right? Wherein either you're looking at cold storages or the first mile, which is refrigerated vehicles. But we are also able to provide the same technology, which is energy efficient and sustainable, for smaller loads as well, right? So instead of somebody who's using dry ice now currently, or just ice cubes for fish, we are able to replicate the same technology through our R&D efforts and product diversification to enable the same technology to make it accessible to smaller loads as well, right? So a combination of these things, over the years, we're able to see increased adoption. And we're able to facilitate that as well. The final point with regard to what Natasha mentioned in terms of public policy and tying it again to what Mr. Ninad started the conversation with, I think there is a lot of, it is very, we see a lot of, we've been in the business for 10 years. And how I see it is in terms of pre-COVID and post-COVID. And post-COVID, I don't know if it's just how the industry evolved and that was a major landmark, but there have been a lot of policy changes which have worked in our favor, right? Which includes the greater focus in terms of scope 3 emissions, the BRSR reporting, and so on and so forth, where especially the larger organizations are having to be more responsible in terms of their supply chain. Right. And even in terms of infrastructure, I think policy changes have ensured that, there is a shift towards, and there is support towards increased infrastructure changes as well as policy changes. And I think a combination of these is kind of snowballing, and things in the last, I think 3 to 4 years, I might say, have moved much faster than they did in the initial 5 to 6 years of us being in the business. And as Ambika also mentioned, right, we are the people who've been in the business right from the beginning, and maybe we've already been in it for a long time. But now we are seeing things moving. We do see more players come in. When we came into the business, we were possibly the only player. Today, we do have direct competition from other companies as well, right? Which we see in a positive spirit. Like we're the pioneers. We're seeing other people who want to join the ride, which I think for the larger ecosystem is something which is very, very positive. So multiple things coming together. I think we will see a change in the next 3 to 5 years. Is what that's a trend. That's what the trend is, and we truly believe that will happen.
No,
So
that
actually, sorry, I just wanted to add on to that Niranjana is right, because when we started off, One Crowd about 10 years back, right? The kind of companies that we were looking at and the kind of companies that we are looking at now, there is a change in terms of lot more companies doing, a lot of technology disruption in sectors, especially cold chain, or whether it is packaging materials. For example, we've invested in a company called Zero Circle very recently that is making, packaging solutions without using any plastic, and it's biodegradable, and so on and so forth. So, very interesting play, but we're seeing a lot more companies in this space, and I think hopefully we can support some of them and help them grow in as we see the industry also evolve.
No, that's great to know. In fact, you both actually preempted one of the questions I had on, what on regulatory reforms. But we'll probably come back to that in a bit. There is this question on your PCM, Niranjana, and I think one of the viewers is asking, can we know what is the end-of-life treatment of PCM in an unorganized waste management in municipalities?
So the PCMs that we manufacture are non-toxic. They are water soluble. So so even if you're looking at a simple pouch that will come with a typical Swiggy, Zomato, or a Zepto, and so on, these you can just cut it and or into the drain. You put it, you open the tap, it will dissolve, right? And the plastic is again, the plastic can be disposed of separately along with plastic waste, but these are again multi-use. We are not expecting them to be single use, so they can be reused multiple times. For example, a PCM, one of the PCMs that we manufacture they can do about 2,000 cycles of freezing and deep freezing. And the similar thing, right? So the vehicles that we had, the first vehicles that we deployed in 2013, they're still working perfectly fine. So we don't see that as, while we are conscious and we are aware of the end of life treatment of these products, they do have a very, very long shelf life, and they are reusable. So a lot of so we work a lot with the e-commerce players for their mid-mile movement, and a lot of them are reusing these, right? So which is also which is also how we are contributing to making the supply chain greener, because because every time we're not just replacing diesel, but it is again, we the whole reduce, reuse, recycle, that contributing to that entire circular the supply chain is something that we are contributing to, which is, so the entire focus is on how we can green the supply chain through multiple angles. Yeah.
Okay. Ambika, the next question is for you. And this is again coming from the panel of people who are, watching this session. What innovations, and this is especially given that, your products are, very sensitive and, perishable, right? So the question is, what innovation in storage and transportation can help improve shelf life of perishable goods? Of course, in the context of what you sell.
Yeah, so see, there are only two ways to increase the shelf life of perishable products, right? Or I would say two commercially acceptable ways. There might be other ways to do it, but if the client doesn't accept it, there's no point innovating around it, right? The two acceptable ways to do it in the Indian market is to either chill the product or to freeze the product, right? Other methods, like for example, drying. You can sell dried fish or dried meat, but nobody's going to buy it because we don't know how to use dried meats or aged meats the way they do in the West, right? So chilling and freezing are really the two options that we have. Now, there is a traditional way to do it, which works, right? But then there are smarter new age solutions that folks like Niranjana are coming up with, which effectively mimic the end result of the traditional system, but do it in a far more economical, scalable, manageable sort of a way, right? When it comes to chilling, it's effectively the use of ice that is extremely prevalent. And the reason why, if Niranjana, do you do chilling as well, or do you only do freezing? Chilling as
We do.
so the way Niranjana can innovate in the chilling space, for example, Delhi NCR is heavily a chilled meat market, is that ice works well when the temperatures are not high. In winters, it works well. What happens when the summer comes, right? Now, suddenly, my ice cost, which was maybe 2 rupees a kg of cooling cost in the winter, can go up to 4-5 rupees a kg in summer. And even then, I may not get a desirable result, because if that ice is not evenly distributed, there are pockets where the cooling is not happening, then my product starts getting spoiled, right? That is one thing. The second thing, of course, is similarly in freezing also. For example, all of the Delhi NCR supply that we do is fresh and chilled. But any supply outside of Delhi has to be frozen, right? And there is a traditional way of doing it, which is like, which he correctly said, which is you just use dry ice. But dry ice is expensive. And, the rates are just going up because suddenly all the dry ice suppliers have realized that they're sitting on a gold mine. So summer may, the rate will shoot through the roof. Then there'll be some shortages, there'll be supply issues. There's a lot of issues around that, right? So if you can innovate around that, you could replicate the exact supply chain. You don't have to change the supply chain, and that's the beauty of solutions like the ones that Niranjana is promoting. Because if you ask somebody to change the way they do business, right, it's not just about investment. You have to retrain your people. You have to make the client understand why something is being done differently. The client has an SOP that they're habituated to. It's going to take them 6 months to get educated. So very dramatic changes are a bad idea. If you can come up with smart solutions which slide into the existing supply chain, right, in these two major categories, which is chilling and freezing, then you can actually build a fairly seamless business. And to what both Natasha and Niranjana said, that adoption, is an issue, but it is growing. I would say, I'm a potential client. So from a client perspective, that actually adoption can happen really fast, right? If you can tell the client that you don't have to change anything in your system, it's just a minor piece of the puzzle, right? And it's a better piece of the puzzle. The chances are that your solution will go through. And I think that is the way it should be projected. It should not be projected as a revolutionary change in the supply chain. It should be sneaked in as an incremental change. And before you know it, you will have adoption because you've just snuck in. And suddenly you've actually created a revolution. Without
Sure.
calling yourself a revolutionary, you've actually caused a revolution, right? So these kind of what I would say sneaky solutions would actually be great in a country like India, because anything revolutionary is seen as expensive, difficult to execute, very complicated to understand, dump it. So that's how I would look at it.
No, thanks for that. I have one other question for you, which has come in, and this is, and before I ask a question which any of you could sort of address, what are the key factors? And you spoke about a lot of inefficiencies in the post-harvest supply at the beginning of this, discussion, right? What are the key factors contributing to these inefficiencies in the post-harvest supply chain? Is the question.
Yeah, so I can only speak for my sector. I do suspect that some of it is also applicable to other perishables like fruits and vegetables and dairy, for example. But I would not want to stretch and comment on that because I don't have in-depth knowledge about them. But especially in the meat sector, it's a very interesting and subjective combination of factors that has led to the current situation. Okay, and some of them are cultural. Everything is not a business reason. There are often social and cultural reasons as to why some industries develop and some don't, right? Now, traditionally, this sector is looked down upon, right? It is a bit of a unaccepted, आप तो कसाई हो, like we very proudly say we are butchers, right? This is our industry and I'm proud of it. But how is it actually seen by the rest of the country, right? How many wealthy people want to invest in this space? How many young, smart, educated people, MBA grads, working professionals want to become butchers, right? Now, if you don't want to be a poultry farmer and you're not proud about being a butcher and you're not passionate about the sector and you don't respect the product, you might eat it, right? You might eat chicken tikka masala every single day, right? But if you don't view the sector with respect, right, in general, as a culture or as a society, right, you're not going to have investments happening in it, you're not going to have change happening in it. And the incumbents who are in the space, who have been doing it for whatever 10,000 years, have no incentive to change because they're not facing any competition, right? Now, for example, the dairy sector, I think if I remember 10 years ago, there was so much action in the dairy space, and there continues to be action in the dairy space with venture capital investments, regional companies, local HNIs investing in dairy. I mean, everything from global capital to local capital goes into the dairy business, right? And that has helped the dairy business evolve. Look where we are now when it comes to dairy processing, post-harvest processing, right? That has not happened yet in meat, and I see that as an opportunity because if you're one of the few ones coming in and disrupting, you are likely to get your pick, right? So for example, when we go to Horeca clients, I know for a fact those very same Horeca clients, those premium clientele, would probably not allow a newbie dairy or an F&B supplier to step through their doors, right? Because there is a mother dairy who's giving dairy products, right? But when it came to meat, the alternative was an unorganized supplier, right? For whatever cultural, social, business, financial reasons. So I got a foot in the door in my first year of operation with premium brands, which perhaps that opportunity would not have come my way had I been in more saturated, more organized industries, right? So that is the reason why it's unorganized, in my opinion. Not enough investments have gone into it. Not enough professional people have entered it and chosen to bring change. And those of us who do benefit for exactly that reason. So, very impressed with folks like, Vivek, who's the founder of Licious. They are really the people who were the torchbearers, right? Who said, we'll come up and clean this part of the value chain. Somebody said, okay, let's clean the retail piece. Somebody saying, okay, let's clean up the supply chain piece. So different people came in, but we were one of the very few. Even today, if you look for meat startups, you can count them on your fingers, significant ones who are operating at any decent scale. And you compare that with the number of dairy or F&B startups or food processing startups or packaged food companies, and you'll see the huge difference in the kind of investments the sector and the interest among young people that it's attracting even today. So it's a challenge and it's an opportunity, but that's effectively the status quo.
Sure, thanks. And Natasha, especially as an investor, see, a couple of things that Ambika spoke about is, respect for that business, right? And the underlying assumption is there isn't perhaps enough respect, even though you may be consuming those products, right? As eating them. And not enough investments happening in them. It's still disaggregated as a business, which we've been talking about. That's been one theme. It's not organized. Now, notwithstanding the technologies that you use for supply chain, be it cold chain or otherwise, right? And notwithstanding how good your product is, which is what Ambika sort of produces, it's people, talent plays a very large role, right?
Right.
And in a business where arguably there hasn't been enough focus for all the reasons mentioned, being that it's been not organized, it's still evolving. You know, as an investor that, besides the technology and the product, you also need talented people. So what's your take on, given the situation, how do people like Desol or Fresher or anybody else for that matter attract top talent to be able to make these businesses successful?
No, very good question. I think, I mean, talent across industries, especially when we are in a country like ours, you'll find, you'll find variety. You will find variety. There have been labor shortages anyways in this industry. If you look at logistics as a segment, right, there have been challenges around that space. So I think it's important that when you're trying to attract talent in a way where you'll have to create that vision about what you want to deliver to the audience. And I think the founders like Niranjana and Ambika are doing that, but I think that's very important, how you indicate and how you portray that to an individual who's coming on board. That's number one, and that's, I think, very important for any business, but I think that's very, very important. But I think second thing that is becoming very important is that you should start growing that organization very early on, right? As you build your business, and you will have to share some part of your company with them, especially when you're talking about senior talent. And most of the startups tend to do that. I mean, of course, there are ways to do that, of giving them ESOPs and so on and so forth. But I think it is very important to share that from the beginning, especially if you want to attract that kind of talent. And lastly, I think, you know, um, the rise of, I mean, it's not relating to specifically here, but the rise of commerce and brands and the direct to commerce, like she spoke about Licious, etc. I think overall has played a very important role today for many young individuals, let's say, to look at startups to start their journey, because they believe that that's the future, right? Niranjana's products do sell to a lot of e-commerce players, right? And that's very important, right? If there was no e-commerce, you wouldn't be able to sell those products. So I think that already has started playing a role, and therefore we are seeing a lot of more young people getting into it. It's still a challenge, but I guess there has been some part of education that has already happened over the last 10 years, which is helping some of the startups to go and acquire talent.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I have another question that's come in. How can and this, any of you can answer. How can startups leverage AI, IoT, or blockchain to build trust and transparency in the supply chain system?
I'm happy to take that because that's part of what we do. So we have a remote monitoring solution, which is again an IoT-based solution, and we are able to provide real-time data in terms of temperature, humidity, and whatever other critical parameters for the end consumer. And again, we're not. So we are, one of the companies in India doing that. But I think globally there are several players who are leveraging IoT and AI for enhancing supply chains. And how that helps is, see, for any supply chain, let alone cold chain. One of the major things that becomes critical, one of course is in terms of visibility, because just having that visibility helps you address or preempt a lot of the problems that the supply chain faces. The other thing is in terms of risk mitigation, right? And AI I think plays a huge role in terms of helping the risk mitigation of the supply chain. And also, of course, again, AI and IoT together in terms of automation, which again, in terms of warehousing and several other aspects of supply chain. So I think these three things do play a very critical part, and they are. And we do have a lot of players making huge advancements, which are definitely helping not just and I think these technologies also improve the efficiency of the supply chain, thereby enabling it to be more sustainable, efficient, and greener. So it's a huge. In fact, we're happy to be one of those who are adopting and providing that technology as well.
I can add to what Niranjana said as well. Apart from what we use internally, more importantly, I think the question was asked because people want to understand that, if anybody wants to start up in this space, right, and build tools around these kind of technologies, then what can be done? So my generic recommendation would be, see, technologies come and go. Today it's AI, yesterday it was blockchain, the day before that it was IoT, tomorrow it's going to be something else, right? All technology in extremely traditional sectors will have very poor adoption if you don't have a very strong understanding of the use case, right? These are not the kind of sectors where somebody who's, and I could be wrong, and I hope I'm proven wrong, but these are not the kind of sectors where somebody who's just dropped out of college can just parachute themselves and build a software and think that it's going to solve something, right? So it is very important to spend all the time in the world in getting a very good understanding of the various use cases. It's also very important because it's a very, very large sector. Each of these sectors are large sectors, to pick those use cases in very specific parts of the value chain for very specific end users as well, right? And to build and iterate accordingly. It's sort of build for your first 10 users, I would say, right? That is very important. Don't build for scale. Build for very minute specific use cases, and then eventually, if that works well, it can take off, because like I had said previously, the sector has depth. So scalability is never a question. Whether you will get that product market fit and that use case right is what is important. So general recommendation would be that less focus on the tech, more focus on a deep understanding of the use cases, and whatever is the latest technology that is being used can be adopted to solve for those use cases through in various directions.
So I just wanted to add one point on this, that and from an investor point of view, right? When we see some of these startups and how they try to sell their solutions to the customers, I think it's very important that technology, whatever role it is playing in whatever form, uh, it can do two things. Either it will make your operations more efficient, which is saving on costs, or it can improve revenue, right? Uh,
Mhm.
so a lot of times, especially in India, more importance is given to technologies that improve on revenue rather than saving on cost, because saving on cost is not very easy to see, right? So you will have to look at it from that angle. It's very, very important if you want to see a lot more adoption coming through in whatever form, whether it is an IoT or an AI or anything. If you are improving revenue, you will see an adoption much faster, because of course customers, I mean the companies would love that, to see that in their P&L immediately. So yeah, somewhere you may have to look at that also.
Sure, thanks. So I think we have time for just one last question. I had many actually, but so there's one I can see here in front of me. It's just that I'll have to figure out, it says either type answer or answer live. So I'll probably press that button once somebody starts answering and see if that reaches the viewer. What are the performance implications and challenges of moving towards carbon neutrality? Any specific case study in your opinion? I'll just repeat that. Performance implications or challenges of moving towards carbon neutrality.
I don't know if I got the question right, but I'm happy to take that, in the sense that I think one of the greatest challenges when as and what we see in terms of adoption of technologies like ours, which are working towards carbon neutrality, is in terms of I think one, of course, is the cost of adoption. And the other, I think, is in terms of what Ambika also mentioned, right? It is in terms of the ease of adoption, like how easy or difficult is it to adopt these technologies. And I think that is where some of the greatest challenges also lie, in terms of how is it that you're able to factor in that are you willing to make that investment, or are you willing to make that effort to actually switch to a more sustainable or a greener technology? I think that is a real challenge, and that's something that we face on a regular basis. And we face that not just in terms of technology we provide, in terms of us as a business as well, right? When we are trying to adopt greener practices for our supply chain as well. These are, I think, the two main challenges that we face as a business. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
So I have one question. We spoke about. Sorry.
Ravikant, if you want, I can just add to what Niranjana is saying quickly
Yeah.
in 10 seconds. So, carbon neutrality is very interesting because, in the meat space, it's almost impossible to be carbon neutral, right? And yet, the red meat producers of New Zealand are actually moving towards carbon neutrality certification. So, it is possible. The challenge is that you would need a fair amount of investments upfront in every part of the supply chain, production, processing, transportation. If anything goes off, it's not going to work. So you need very fully integrated businesses. You need upfront investments. And at the end of the day, if government can support it with subsidies or grants, that will make it a lot more possible. But more importantly, at the end of the day, the consumer should be willing to pay for it. So, New Zealand lamb sells for 3,000 rupees a kg, right? Whereas Indian mutton sells for 800 rupees a kg, or 1,000 rupees a kg, or 1,500 rupees a kg at max, right? And once New Zealand lamb is carbon neutral, they'll start charging 5,000 rupees for it. So people are willing to pay at the end of the day, or somebody has to pay in the supply chain. Then you'll see a lot less resistance to that process.
Sure, thanks. That's very enlightening. So, I'm afraid we've run out of time. There are still a few more questions. So what I'm perhaps going to do is to ask, the questions to be probably forwarded to some of you, and, we can find a way of answering them. But meanwhile, Ambika, Natasha, Niranjana, thank you ever so much on behalf of the CII Western region for making time, for this session. It has been a primer for me as well. To learn so much in so little time. Thank you all very much for your time once again.
Thank you so much for having me. So it's been a
Thank-
pleasure being on the panel.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you,
so much
Ravi.
for
Thank you
having
so
us.
much.
Thank you. See you.